I am here with Aldo Huitzil, real estate attorney. We are going to discuss the benefits of being a landlord, some of the risks about being a landlord, and also the pros and cons and risk reward being a real estate broker representing a landlord. There is a lot of RLTO rules and regulations. We love investor clients on our end. They usually buy multiple buildings. They usually come back to us for rentals, and it's a great revenue stream for us, and usually high ticket items. What do we need to know about representing landlords? Give us the shiny side. What are the benefits first?
Yeah, thanks, man. So my name is Aldo Huitzil. I'm a real estate attorney. And yeah, some of the benefits are you're going to get income and you're going to get equity, especially if you are renting them out, the tenants pay your mortgage, and it just builds equity over time. That's kind of like the all-star version of what it means to the landlord.
Yeah, agree. I mean, principal reduction, having someone paid on your mortgage is fantastic. Obviously, there's day-to-day maintenance. Sometimes you get a tenant that calls every week, but usually you're in good shape and they run their own ship and kind of move forward as if it's their own home. Let's talk about the risks, right? Let's talk about the legal aspects, really, while you're here. We know what the real estate side is. Give us the risks, Aldo. Tell us what we need to know about writing leases, protecting our landlords, and giving them information.
Sure. The starting point of that is just a lease. You want to have a very good written lease that is current through the whole tenancy. A lot of times what happens is that when you first get the tenant, you will have an amazing lease, but once that lease expires, you don't do what you need to do to make sure that lease stays current. And then you go into what's called a month-to-month tenancy. And essentially that's just a verbal tenancy where it is a lease, it's a lease agreement, but it doesn't have the clarity that your written lease has. And clarity is really important because if a lot of this is minimizing risk. If something happens and you want to go to court, the courts are flooded with evictions and lease issues. So the more clear you can make it to the courts, the better. That's why you want to have a written lease, it stays current, and you can, and it's a much smoother process for you to manage your property as a landlord.
High level, give us some of like the liability and legal costs for breach of tenancy, eviction, things like that. High level, I know it can vary.
Yeah, so we separate those in Cook County, particularly through basically Chicago and not Chicago. Chicago, you already mentioned it, has something called the RLTO. That stands for Chicago Residential Landlord Tenant Ordinance. It's an archaic set of rules that were passed in Chicago in the 1980s because we essentially had very bad landlords. And the RLTO is very tenant friendly, meaning if you don't do one of, let's say, 20 things that a landlord is supposed to do, you can get sued for anywhere between about $2,000 to, it just goes up, $20,000, $30,000, sometimes $40,000. And these things are like very minute things. For example, if you start a lease in Chicago and you take a security deposit, you have to give a receipt. And in that receipt, you have to list certain information, where it's going to be deposited, who is taking the receipt, it has to be signed, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of times we advise our clients not to take security deposits, but if you want to do them, there's a way to do them. But just know that when you're running your property as a landlord, especially in Chicago, there are huge factors that you need to be aware of. Outside of Chicago, the RLTO does not apply, but that doesn't mean that you also cannot minimize your risk. So, but that's where the initial point that I was talking about, have a lease, make sure it's clear. That way you know what is a violation, what is a standard, what's going to happen if this happens, what's going to happen if this doesn't happen.
Right. As a real estate broker representing your landlord, we do suggest they take non-refundable move-in fees. Also, for the landlord, if you have a lease that's expiring, I talked about this. Contact your landlord 60 days before lease expiration. Let him know that his lease is expiring for Unit 2. See if they're going to renew. If not, you can represent them. That is more money for you guys. So this is a win-win. Keep your clients in compliance and also generate business. That leads to compliance and minimizing risk. You talked a lot about leases. What are some good written current leases that you suggest?
The good current ones are, my office has one that we model particularly after the RLTO. So everything that the RLTO has and kind of throws out there, we cover it.
And you'll hand that to our...
I have that available, yes. And then if you have a lease that you, for example, absorbed Don't worry. Again, a lot of this is minimizing risk, and one of the final points as we get through this presentation is that, always try to consult with an attorney. Doesn't have to be me. Doesn't have to, somebody, because it's an investment, and as I mentioned, you want to be able to bear the fruits of what it means to be a landlord, income and equity, but it just comes with the playing field that there are these risks. So talk to an attorney. Is this lease okay? Can we change it? What can we do to set you up? Once you get better accustomed in how to manage this, it's going to be like clockwork. Basically, it's going to be like out of sight, out of mind. But you need to invest in it at the beginning.
And absorbing a client, that's something we spoke about off camera. When you're buying a property for your clients and there are multiple units, make sure the attorneys are reviewing the lease, and if it needs to be amended or modified, is that something we could do during attorney review?
Yeah, so when you absorb the clients, let's say you buy a 3-flat and there's already tenants in there, right? What you want to do is get as much information as to the lease agreements before you close, and you get that from the seller. So hopefully, if they're doing what I'm suggesting here, they have leases, they have rent history, they have all these things, and you want to see it, and then you ask yourself whether these tenants are going to be cooperating or if they're already problem tenants, which sometimes happens. So if you're going to be buying a property and you're going to have to likely commence an eviction or have very uncooperative tenants, you might want to use that in negotiations as a credit. So for example, if you take on an eviction and it's going to cost you legal fees of anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000, you say, hey, look, we have problem tenants. They haven't been cooperative. I'm going to likely have to take on this burden after. Give me a $3,000 to $5,000 credit and let's call it a day.
One question I get all the time: how long does it take to evict someone?
That's a good question.
I've been asked that dozens of times.
Yeah, you're not gonna like it. So in Chicago, anywhere between 5 to 7 months, and this is for uncooperative tenants. It can go higher if they hire an attorney and they make life difficult for you. They basically go after your Achilles heel, the kink in your armor. But this is and in not Chicago, it's a little faster, but not by much. It's about 4 to 6 months. But this is the whole reason why I say make sure you're consulting with an attorney, make sure you're doing things right, because even if you, and for example, my office, we're as fast as they come, but even if you're doing everything right, if you have one little kink in your armor, you didn't do one little thing, the tenant and or their attorneys can use that to leverage to delay the process. And because we live in the United States of America and they have due process, they're able to do that. Not that they're going to win, but they're going to say, I'm going to file this motion or I'm going to raise this defense, and it's going to take us 2 months to litigate. So now your 5 to 7 months just changed to 7 to 9 months, all without getting paid rent.
Right.
So it's really crucial that you set up these factors.
And your armor is your lease. And we always tell brokers and landlords, live and die by people's credit. Not only check their most recent landlord, but call 2 landlords ago, because if it's a bad tenant, the current landlord that they're living in is going to give them a glowing recommendation because they want them out of their building. So, Aldo, honestly, we appreciate your insight here. It's super valuable. All your info will be on this film, and people know how to reach out to you. I'm always here to chat about landlords, risks and rewards, and owning buildings. I love it. I own a few myself. I'm a big fan. Thanks again for joining us, and appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.